by the time we leave this room, that you would have learned something about strategy, something about conventional warfare, non-conventional warfare, something about diplomacy, and something about the relationship between US security and Islam. Now, therefore, I'm going to start with the main points, and then from there I go to what I call the terminology of conflict, because obviously we cannot understand what is happening with regard to the relationship between Islam and US security without you marrying both, marrying the points and the terminology. And here are the points. We are talking about a conflict that has no borders, no flags, no boundaries, no names. Factions change and morph into something else and recreate themselves. So it is a moving scene. For a moving scene, if you want to study a moving scene of today's world, remember, you are in the age of the individual, no longer the government. The individual today is more important and more dynamic and more action-oriented than the government. Therefore, with regard to the interrelationship between faith and US security, I'm going to present to you these points and the terminology, and don't be afraid to ask any question. I always enjoy what we call in academia, elatedly, the silly question, because the silly question is the question that is asked from the heart without pretending you are a professional, allowing people like myself to respond and to get you on your way. Now, the first point is that in the US right now, regarding ISIS and all these revolutionaries, these butchers, there is no coherent policy. This is point number one, no coherent policy. Point number two, in the US now, especially in this confusing election season, where there are people who are running for president of the United States, and they would not hire them as doormen at my law office or at SUNSGLOW. There is a hawkish demand for a hawkish approach. A hawkish approach means applying what we call countervailing force. Countervailing force means if you have an enemy of 10, you have to have 1,000 in order to make sure that the contingency would work. Point three is that our Secretary of Defense, Ashton Carter, has what we call the 3 R's. R number one, and I'll explain each one of them. Raqqa, which is in Syria, northeast of Syria. It is the capital of ISIS. R number two is Ramadi. Ramadi is in the north of Iraq. I was there for 2-3 years defending a guy whom I finally liberated from the Marines because he had nothing to do with terrorism. And R number three are raids. Raids that do not mean ground raids. Raids means airstrike from the air, because our President Obama, following the general feeling of the public, decided that enough is enough with the wars, better build the roads in Brooklyn than building the roads in Iraq. These are the 3 R's of Ashton: Raqqa, Ramadi, and what else? Raids. Remember that raids can never control the ground. I was there. I learned about this not from the book, but from my being in Algeria during the war in 1960. Therefore, raids do not control the ground. The footprint or the foot soldier controls the ground. The foot soldier can be assisted from the air. So the air strikes are not the primary weapon. The primary weapon is a friendly force on the ground. And we don't have that yet, except for the examples I mentioned later. Point number 4 is that we have a terminology in the Pentagon called advise and assist, which means that since you are going to be using ground forces, local ground forces, because of the correct belief that those who want to fight for their country should be fighting for their country. You do not fight for your country by borrowing somebody else's blood and treasure. America is done with this. America is done with this. America has never gained a war since 1945. All the wars in which the US was involved have been losing wars, or at maximum a draw. And it hurt the economy, it affected all of us, especially that our armed forces are not democratic enough, because democratization of the army comes from the draft, because then the son and daughter of the big and the son and daughter of the small get drafted, and therefore the parents would understand that war is not your first option. It should be the last option. Diplomacy and dialogue and intercultural studies, as we have here in our department, should be in the forefront. Point number 5. There is, of course, at the present time, the US has needed to send some forces to advise and assist. Now, point number 4 about advise and assist is misleading, because whom are you advising? You got to know whom are you advising. Are you advising a friend or a foe? Or are you advising a foe who tomorrow is going to be a friend, or a friend who's going to be a foe? A confusing equation. Nobody can determine how to do about this. And assist, how to assist? Do you assist them from the air? Okay, we got this point. But how about the ground? How about the ground warfare? So point number 5 has to do with what we call incremental increase, namely a bit by bit by bit by bit, as if you are paying a mortgage on your house, or the loan of your car, or your educational loan, whatever it is, a bit by bit by bit. Drip, drip, drip does not generally work in unconventional warfare. Remember what I said, the individual is now a rocket, the individual is a missile, the individual is no longer quiet, because the Arab Spring had opened the mouth of everybody to speak and to express themselves. Therefore, you get all this hubbub, all this confusion, and you get people like El-Ayouty who used to go into the field and find out what is happening, who is talking about what. Point number 6, the obvious. We now have a complicated battlefield where US security is involved. The complication comes from the fact, number 1, as I mentioned before, the factions keep on changing. Number 2, Al-Qaeda, which performed 9/11, a horrendous criminality in the name of Islam. Islam has nothing to do with it. Islam does not advocate the killing of the innocent. Those who died in 9/11 are the real martyrs. The 19 who effected that horrendous act are total criminals. They have nothing to do with faith, have nothing to do with Islam, have nothing to do with Judaism, have nothing to do with Christianity, Hinduism, nothing at all. They use this cloth, this garb, and this beard in order to hide a criminal intent. Because the guy or the gal who went that morning to the World Trade Center to do trading or to represent somebody or keep an office had nothing to do with foreign policy at all. So the battlefield is complicated, and the complication comes from the fact that the adversary is not one, they are many, and they keep on changing, and that many always use Islam as a shabby cover. And people like myself have now the duty to say in our blog, in our books, in our lectures, enough is enough. I said this next to Bishop Murphy of the Rockville Center at the Jewish Center on October 30th. I said interfaith needs to transition from dialogue to action. Enough with dialogue, enough with conferences, blah, 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 blah. At the end of it, everybody goes to have lunch and then go to see a movie or use the ad. Enough. Bless you. If we are serious about the situation of today, you got to follow it daily. Unfortunately, the media is always in our window, like this window. If you open this window, you see only part of Brooklyn. You don't see the whole scene. You have to go up on the top to see the whole scene. And no American audience, depending on the media, can see the whole scene. They only see a fraction of it because they are busy. I calculated by statistics, if you want to talk to your neighbor, please leave the room and talk to your neighbor outside because it distracts me, all right? So, I want you to feel comfortable listening to me. In order to have a question, if you need to whisper or say something to the other party, the outside is the forum for this, not here, because I lose my attention when I find that I am not reaching you because you are busy talking to your neighbor, all right? So, the complicated battlefield is number 6. Point number 7. Are we gradually being sucked into a new Middle East war? We are, but gradually, very gradually. The reason is ISIS is expanding. ISIS has secured a victory just yesterday. ISIS is expanding because the area in which they expand is empty. No people there. I was there. I saw no borders. I saw no marking. I saw no police stations. I saw no vehicles. I saw no tents. I saw no palm trees. What I saw was sand and dunes. So therefore, the expansion of ISIS is misleading. It is misleading because they advertise that they are successful. They use the social media as a weapon. They create videos out of nothing. And they say, even with regard to the horrendous tragedy of the Russian airplane that fell in Sinai, they brought it down. They are the worst liars in the history of mankind. Because that plane came down because of, as the investigation indicates, as a pilot error. I know that because I did some legal work for the International Aviation or Civil Aviation Organization, a special agency of the United Nations in Montreal. So we are sucked into this because our security requires it, because the forces on the ground are weak. The weapons that they had, that the other side has, is the most up-to-date weapons. $1 trillion worth of weapons are in the hands of ISIS. How did they get it? They got it from the Iraqi army when the Iraqi army fled in June of 2014. What happened? Why did they flee? Well, because when we invaded Iraq, the most stupid invasion in the history of the United States of America, the man who was there, called Bremer, out of total stupidity, he must have been on some kind of heroin, disbanded the entire Iraqi army, 500,000 men under arms with the most sophisticated equipment. He disbanded them, so they became unemployed. When you get a fighting man or woman unemployed, they are seeking someplace else to fight as a mercenary. So what happened is that they happen to be Sunni. In Islam, there is a fiction called Sunni Islam and Shi'i Islam. It doesn't exist. I'm writing a book now in Arabic saying neither Sunni nor Shi'i but Islam. And that myth is being perpetrated even by Muslims, like retrograde Muslims like the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, in their white garments and clothing and the beard, etc. Their interpretation of Islam is utterly wrong. I teach this subject at Fordham University School of Law every fall under the title of Islamic Law and Global Security, to which the West Point Military Academy sends an officer each semester, which is only the fall, because my time only allows for the fall, aside from my internship here at St. Francis, which has been going now for 20 years, in order to learn and take it back to the future military leaders of the United States. Therefore, the question here is that we have to realize that we have to be involved somehow in the process, because the Muslims, most of them, are misinterpreting their own religion, as in the Wahhabi case. How did the Wahhabi affect our security in the United States? Through producing and supporting madrasas, which is schools, that says men are superior to women. Humbug. Islamic law equates between men and women, or genital mutilation, a crime, or to cut the hand of those who steal, stupidity. That was only a parable in the Quran. I read the Quran 19 times. I'm now in the 20th time because I read Arabic. I like the Arabic classic. It is very Shakespearean Arabic. And you find one thing: there is no real hijab in Islam, in the Quran. None. Because Islamic law is based on two pillars, concrete pillars, one higher than the other. This is the Quran, which is the Bible of Islam, and this is the Sunnah, which what Muhammad said or did, and some of it has been fabricated. Okay, you have these two pillars, but between them there is the area of the brain. We call it ijtihad. Ijtihad means the application of the mind to the text. Circumstances change. Don't judge the circumstance of today with what had happened 1,400 years ago. Therefore, we are being sucked in this because we need our own security, and there is not enough people who can educate about Islam, like Muslims like myself, who's a lawyer with a background of political science and has connected with Al-Azhar, which is the greatest citadel for modern Islam for the past 1,000 years. I had a wonderful meeting with the Imam of Al-Azhar, and he asked me, please, could you just once in a while speak in the name of Al-Azhar? I said, I have been speaking in the name of Al-Azhar in the United States and at the United Nations. Therefore, the US, because of that complication, is resorting to what we call, this is point number 8, resorting to the commandos. What are the commandos? The commandos have different names. They are special forces. Now, special forces are actually directed by two wings of the military in the United States. On the one side, the military, the Pentagon; on the other side, the CIA. The CIA is nearly an independent agency. Sometimes there is not enough correlation between the two. You know why? America is a big country. America is 50 countries lumped in one, and we call the United States. The American Constitution was drafted 250 years ago. There are people like Justice Stephen who says we have to amend the Constitution. But amending the Constitution is going to take a long time. When I teach at the Cairo University School of Law as an adjunct professor, I teach the US Constitution under the title of What Not to Copy from the US Constitution. Do I have to tell the Egyptians, you have the right to carry arms? Yeah, you have the right to carry arms. What is going to happen to the general fabric of society, in Arab society, if everyone and his uncle have the right to carry arms? Remember that last year alone, there have been fatalities in the United States, 3,500 fatalities by guns in the United States, because the Second Amendment of the US Constitution has been interpreted since the time of the creation of the Republic as if we need militias. You don't need militias because there is now a standing army called the Great US Army. So that amendment has to go. But to make it go, there is the National Rifle Association, a great lobby. Lobbyists control a good part of our legislation. It's part of our problem. Therefore, the problem of our security and Islam does not only emanate from Islam, it also emanates from within. Or you get a guy like Ben Carson running for president who says no Muslim can qualify for president of the United States. Who are you to say that? You are creating bigotry. And you, as a colored man, shame on you. to be in that position and say something as stupid as that. You cannot control the future. The future is that this means you are secluding a minority of the United States from something which one day could happen. And why not? Islam and Ebola are not the same. Islam is a faith. When you say Allahu Akbar, it does not mean I'm coming to kill you. Only the terrorists say that. It means we are all equal before God, regardless of the faith we hold in our heart. Point number 9. ISIS needs a strong response for the reasons I mentioned, from point 1 to point 9. Point 10. ISIS controls a large swath of territory, as I said, in the north, empty. We call it, there's something called the empty quarter in Saudi Arabia. I was there when I was in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. This is another empty quarter. They are running amok in an area as if you are in Arizona, in one part of the desert, and in the desert, and the song says, you don't know your name. Point number 11. The air strikes in support of whom? Because you don't know who's in the ground. We don't have intelligence in the ground. We don't have informants in the ground. So sometimes you bomb the good and the bad. And when the good is bombed, then they turn to the other side. Remember what happened to Doctors Without Borders a few days ago when they were bombed out of existence, because that was happening in Afghanistan. Gives you a clear indication that the air does not control the ground. Point number 11. Where is the legal framework for the U.S. to be involved in this war? Under the U.S. Constitution, Congress declares war. Good. But the U.S. Constitution is a compromise. A compromise. Because the various authorities, the congressional authority, the executive authority, and the judicial authority are the Olympic rings. Each ring overlaps the other. So when you come to the declaration of war, Congress declares war. But who informs Congress to declare war? The President of the United States. The era of Pearl Harbor is gone. The era of Pearl Harbor was a clear aggression against the United States coming from Japan. And Roosevelt said, the only fear you can have, you can feel is fear itself. We are at war. I asked Congress to declare war, and Congress declared war. When 9/11 happened, Bush had from Congress an authorization. An authorization is not a declaration. An authorization is like you're going to a notary public who signs on something to say your name is correct, the signature is correct. That's all. It is not a declaration of war. Now, until today, all U.S. involvement in all these wars in the Middle East, whether it is Syria, whether it is Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, or whether it is Yemen, or whether it is Libya, all come from a mere authorization that happened to be in 9/11. 9/11 was not a war. 9/11 was an act of criminality. It should have been stopped at the point of going to the source in Afghanistan, killing those criminals, and coming home. But occupying Afghanistan, good luck. Occupying Iraq, good luck. Why? Because the population controls the ground. Taliban is not foreign to Afghanistan. Taliban, when they took Kunduz about a week ago, Kunduz is lost. No, Kunduz is not lost. Kunduz returned back to its people. I'm not in support of the Taliban. I'm indicating to you the confusing thing about terminology and about saying who lost Afghanistan and who did not lose Afghanistan. And mark my word, we are not going to be able to dislodge the Taliban. They are there. They have fought these wars for the past 1,000 years. They decimated the British forces in the 19th century. They decimated the Soviet forces in the 1980s. They are decimating now the so-called NATO troops and US troops and General this and leading that. All these to me look like a play, a dangerous play. Now, let's go forward. So point number 11, as I said, controlling the air, you bomb and you don't know who's below because you don't have an informant. You have somebody who says, oh, this group might be hostile. Point number 12. I said, I go back to point number 12, the lack of legal framework. That legal framework is out of date because it is something called authorization that took place after 9/11. I'm coming now to point number 20 quickly. Point number 13, the lack of an attainable goal. If you are going to study, you want to know why you are studying, and you want to know what am I studying, and you want to expect from what the professor told you in class, what are the possible questions. You don't guess when you are preparing for an exam. You are targeted when you are being examined. You have to know the relationship with what was said in the class and what is said in the text and what your colleagues have asked the questions. Note this down. Guess what? You get an A. Why? Because you have kept all these things in mind, you analyzed it, and you connected the dots. Therefore, there is no attainable goal here. What is the goal? Our goal is really a very minimum goal, is to prevent the worst. We have all kinds of choices. The only choice we have is the worst time. Then, as I said about the Constitution and the Olympian overlapping of between Congress, the President or the White House, and the judiciary, there are no clear limits. There are no clear limits because Congress has one task, to say, I'm not going to fund this program. Okay? All right. You said that. And the Congress foolishly had shut down the government a year ago. And now they are threatening to shut down the government on other things. Okay? What kind of superpower is this? Where government can be shut down because they say, oh, these entitlements, these poor are not entitled to their footsteps. Well, they are entitled to the footsteps. Why? Because you created the footsteps. You did not bring them up to the level of other sectors of society. And when that crazy guy called Trump saying, I'm going to build a wall, what wall? The only wall is in his head, between rationality and irrationality. I'm going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. Oh, really? The Mexicans are going to pay for your wall? And he said, I'm going to have a nice gate. Is this going to be the pearly gate of Mr. Trump? And is it because you are rich? You can govern? I have been in this country for 63 years. I came as a guest of the US government, as a Fulbright scholar. I have never before Mr. Trump opened his big mouth. I have never heard an American say, I'm great because I'm rich. People say, I'm great because I'm serving the people. People like Buffett or Gates, not people like Trump or whatever his name is, with his hairdo. Anyway, I like his hairdo. I don't have much hair, but at least I don't have a hairdo like that. I like my barber. Anyway, so there are no clear limits between the president and Obama in this. And so far, what happened? All these rates from the above, what did they do? What have they accomplished? Already $4 billion have been spent, and we don't know the result. Point number 16, I already satisfied it because it has to do with the congressional authorization of 9/11. And so point number 17 is a consequence of this no formal authorization. And they say, oh, why don't you create a no-fly zone? Really, a no-fly zone? You mean so no other airplanes can come in this? You need to protect it. It costs money. And point number 19, Russia is already in. So Russian planes and American planes may collide with one another. And last point in the future, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I come to the terminology very quickly. Remember these terms and then we open for questions and answers. Remember the term, I'm not going to explain these terms, I just want you to be aware of them. The broader war means a war that has no limits. The second thing, boots on the ground. We call it footprint. Point number 3, the special operations forces, we only in Syria we have 50. 50. I mean, the class here, if you get double, you can qualify to be special forces. How can you combat ISIS with 50? But in Iraq we have 3,500. Number 4, the improvisation in the war. There's always improvisation every day, every day, every day. Watch the language. You learn a great deal from the language of conflict. And then there is, of course, who is our allies who are reliable. The only allies are the Kurds. Why? Because the Kurds want to establish their own state, which means lopping off Iraq in the north, and possibly Syria. What will happen? And about the future? I said I don't know. I know a little bit about the future. Syria is never going to be united. It's going to be at least 5 pieces. 5 pieces. Now, point number 6. Guiding the local fighters. Already we got that. Number 7. The covert training and equipment by the CIA. I already said this with regard to the special forces. Point number 8. The cutting off of the routes to Raqqa. When you want to occupy a certain area or certain town, you start by cutting off the roads, and then after this you make your frontal attack, and then the barbaric rule of ISIS is open and common, and the rest is just a repeat. It was a fight about who will succeed Muhammad. That's all. It was a political fight. That nothing to do with religion, because in Islam is really, it started as the religion of the desert. And the desert is simple. I was born in a desert, the eastern desert of Egypt. I know the best place to hide is the desert. If you want to be running away from somebody, don't go to the jungle, go to the desert. You will never be found. You know why? Because every tribesman will open their little tent to hide you, because tribes hate authority. So the entire fight has nothing to do with religion, it has to do with the politics.
Well, doesn't each side accuse the other side of being apostates?
I'm glad you asked this question, which will be your last question to open the door for others, and then we can come back to you. Yes, apostasy means I declare you as an infidel. In Islamic law, the term does not exist. The term infidel, the kafir, does not exist. Because Islamic law, an infidel is somebody without values. It does not mean somebody who is a non-Muslim. It does not mean this at all. So when you declare somebody to be non-religious, you are assuming for yourself the power of God, because the entire thing has to do with our Creator. Your relationship is with your Creator, not with a broker or an intermediary. That's where it belongs, all right? The European media is better for one reason. They colonized that area. They know the language, they know the culture, and they know everything. America has never been a colonial power. America has been an imperial power, but not a colonial power. Colonization, colonial power rules. An imperial power just have a kind of influence over the area. That is why. Secondly, they know Arabic. The French, the Italians, the Brits, the Germans. Guess who were the first one who started to study the Quran and Islam? The Jesuits. They are the best students of Islam. They are the people who know it by heart. In fact, I was once asked by Cairo University School of Law to come to be a part of a defense committee for a doctorate. My plane was late. I arrived late, so I could not make it. So I asked the committee, who did you bring to replace me? He said, we brought the Jesuit Father Kanawati, who lives in Old Cairo. So that's why it is different. And then the geographic proximity also is a factor. And finally, with regard to America, since I came to America, America has always been immersed in America. And therefore, the entire thing is America. Over there, it is, what is the other side going to do? I said the American public does not need to be armed.
Yes.
Yes, I did say this. Why would you arm the American public? We have armed forces, we have police forces, we have special forces. Now, the gun in the hand of somebody is cause for trouble. Of course, you say, I need to protect myself. If you want to protect myself, buy a gun, but be vetted to see that I'm not talking about you, that one is not crazy, one does not have all of these problems, etc. So, without that, which is opposed by the National Rifle Association, everybody buys a gun. There are 300 million guns in the America today. 300 million. And as I said before, the fatalities resulted from this in America, 3,500. The total Americans who died as a result of terrorism were only 300. So those who died by Americans who died by American guns are 1,000 more than the Americans that died by terrorism. I see progress. Charity starts at home. Let us focus at home. Let us improve the lot of the poor. Let us see that taxation is fair. Let us see that immigration is open, because this country has benefited greatly by a sound immigration policy. Let us see that the minorities are not downtrodden. Let us see that those who are running for president are sane. Let us see that the special interests are not controlling our legislation. Let us see that when you vote for somebody in Queens, you see the face of that somebody once in a while in order to tell them about your grievances. And finally, let us see that women are men and men are treated equally in terms of pay. That would be the America that we should have. When I came to the United States, I arrived in Boston, coming by boat from Alexandria. I arrived September 15, 1952. And they made a huge discovery in Boston. Number one, I discovered ketchup. Big discovery. Number two, I discovered that I can even meet Eisenhower and Truman, which I did on the courthouse in Trenton, New Jersey, because I was posted to a teacher's school called Trenton State Teachers College, now called the College of New Jersey. And both of them, Eisenhower was running for office as president. He was president of Colombia, and his running mate was Nixon. And he asked me, he said, son, how long are you going to be here for? I said, 10 months. Oh, stay longer. A week later came Truman. Truman was running for Adlai Stevenson. He asked the same question. I said, my God, two of these great men are asking me to stay. I was 24 years old. I said, I have never seen the face of the head of state of Egypt. I'm going to stay. And my 10 months in the United States are not over yet. If we give up, gradually, we're going to be overtaken. Gradually. Not by force, but by intimidation. You remember when Bush, with his bullhorn at Ground Zero, he said, the terrorists are not going to change our way of life. Well, they did change our way of life. Today, what we have in the United States, no less than 50,000 security companies. 50,000 security companies. And today, as every day, even especially in Halloween, fear is a force. They say, oh, how much insurance have you got? Oh, that's not enough. Maybe this will happen. How much insurance? No, maybe this will happen. Are you going to cross the street? Well, maybe this lady can make you cross the street. Everything is security. And there is no total security in today's age. You cannot have it. The Israelis found this. You cannot have total security. Netanyahu has not yet awakened to that fact. You cannot have total security. You can have relative security. Therefore, yes, it is tribal, but it is a tribalism with a purpose. They have this, whenever, I want to tell you something, whenever you look at the map, take it from me, if you see a straight line in the Middle East about boundary, remember that it was not drawn by the Arabs. The Arabs don't draw straight lines. It was done by the Brits or by the French. Straight lines in the boundary have cut tribes one from the other. We are living in a world where our present history has to be rewritten. Our concepts have to change. If you are not ready to change every day, then just sign off. Sayonara. Islam does not distinguish between religions. Islam equates between all religions. Islam accepts a non-religion, non-faith. This point, first point. The second point is that the Crusaders who went into the Middle East from the 9th to the about 11th century, who mediated the conflict, who tried to mediate the conflict? St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis of Assisi walked through these lines and brought peace between Saladin, who is not an Arab, he's a Kurd, and the opposed forces in Jerusalem. And when he was going there, he was told by his followers, "Oh, you're going to be killed." He said, "If I'm killed, my soul belongs to God." And he went there. This is what I call interfaith in action. I am personally married to a devout Catholic woman, a former nun, a Josephite, who left the convent because she had particular questions about the policy of the church after Vatican II. And I met her at St. John's University. I was teaching there at the graduate school at St. John's University. And I saw her at the distance. I could not recognize her. She said, "Hello, Professor El-Ayouty. Would you come to my house for Thanksgiving dinner?" I went there. About a week later, I proposed. I'm a good actor. Now, I'm also a member of a Jewish temple called Temple Emmanuel. I just gave Professor Molina now a brochure. I was with Bishop Murphy, who said, "You know, El-Ayouty, you should come and have a cup of coffee with me." I said, "Sure. If you invite me with a cup of coffee, maybe a sandwich would be good." But in any case, I live my faith through interfaith. I love this college. You know why? Look at the faces of the people in front of you here. Look at these faces, beautiful faces. I have been here attached to this since 1997, when the great Bakarola was here. And he was my dean of the law school. He said, "Yassin, you got to come and do something here." I said, "Frank, I don't have time." He said, "Come on, you have time. You create time. I asked you to come and you come." I came and I have been here as a fixture. Not really a fixture, because once in a while we don't have an intern, so I do my writing. But what I'm saying in effect is that unless you open your mind and your heart to the fact that religion is not a straitjacket, religion is a faith in your heart. It is flexible. It should accept others. And guess what? Who taught Muhammad religion? It was the Jewish rabbis in Arabia and the Christian monks. I went for a cancer operation back in the year 2008, bladder cancer. And this is why I walk slowly, because they took not only the diseased bladder, but also took some muscle from my left leg. And the doctor there at Sloan Kettering called Dalbagni, suddenly he stopped talking to me in Arabic with an Egyptian accent. I said, "Guido, where did you get this from?" He said, "I was brought up by the Jesuits in Cairo till I was 24 years old." I said, "I'm yours. If you kill me, go ahead." But he didn't kill me. He cured me. So, and then he said to me, I see him now once a year. He said, "Yassin, I'm much younger than you, but you have more vitality than I am. Where did you get your vitality from?" I said, "Well, I never go to bed with stress. I keep stress out. Stress is a killer. I'm not the guy for stress. I'm already, stress should be made into a function." What I'm giving you these examples about is to let you know that pessimism should have no place in your heart. No place. I don't believe in it. I served the United Nations for 32 years, as Dr. Forsberg said, from 1954 to 1986, where I took an early retirement because I have all these great options outside. During the Cold War, as head of the African division of the political department, I was like the wall, not the Trump wall. I was between the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union was there, and America, because Africa was the playground. And I walked from the UN on First Avenue on 42nd Street, Manhattan, to our apartment on First Avenue on 23rd Street. And at every block I say, what troubled me today And I succeeded in defining the problems for me, and I'm sure for other humans, in three. A problem that is solved, but your mind keep on working on it. Why? It's gone. Let it go. Secondly, a problem that somebody else inflicted on you. Well, tomorrow watch out for this guy because he's really a bit of trouble. Number three, a trouble that I caused for myself. Tomorrow I will do better. So, that's my story. And I think I have reached the limit that the chairperson has said. You have been great.